all, welcome to section 2, Theories, Principles, Policies and Models of Inclusive Urban Planning. This section explores the foundational elements of inclusive urban planning, emphasizing practical tools for creating equitable cities. Theories provide a framework for understanding diverse urban needs. They shift focus from singular viewpoint to embracing diversity and inclusion. Policies and models will be examined for the real world applicability, and we need to understand what are the inspiration or action towards developing an inclusive urban environment. So let's embark on this exploration of transformative ideas together. Today we are delving into the foundational concept of human rights and how they relate to the idea of a right to the city. This is crucial because it frames inclusive urban planning as not just an ideal but a necessity grounded in human rights. Let's start with the basics. The human rights framework uh, it emphasizes that access to housing, mobility, services, safety, and participation are not just privileges but basic rights. When these rights aren't equitably distributed, it can lead to urban exclusion, which undermines human dignity and citizenship. Now, on to the concept of the right to the city as introduced by Henry Lefebvre and expanded by David Harvey. This idea poses that every urban resident, not just property owners or the economically advantaged, should have the right to access urban resources, engage in decision making, and shape the city's form. This is about democratizing urban life and ensuring everyone has a voice. Inclusive planning takes these concepts and operationalizes them. It aims to ensure equitable access to urban spaces and services, particularly marginalized groups, should be addressed. This, this shift from market driven to people oriented planning emphasizes participation, equity, and spatial justice. Cities should be seen as a collective social goods rather than commodities. In summary, integrating human rights into urban planning isn't just a concept. It has the uh, uh, it has to has the implementation character to it. Uh, for example, of the talk that we have just finished, let's talk about the people centric climate action. So, this initiative is a crucial theme presented at COP25 in 2019. Let's break down why this is significant and how it ties into our broader discussion on inclusive urban planning. Firstly, at the heart of this message is a human rights based approach to tackle climate change. This means communities, especially the most vulnerable, must be central to our strategies for both mitigating and adapting to climate impacts. We know that climate action isn't just about reducing emissions, it's about ensuring that our actions promote equity and human dignity. Next, there is a strong call to move beyond the dominant neoliberal model. This involves rejecting frameworks rooted in extractivism and fossil fuels, which often prioritize profits over people. Instead, we, we are urged to affirm human rights related to habitat and the right to the city as essential guide for climate frameworks. Participation and governance play a pivotal role here. Civil society, youth, local communities are not just stakeholders. They must have a real voice and vote in decisions affecting their futures. Democratic management of our common resources like land, water, and cities is essential. Lastly, equity is not negotiable in this vision. We must address social, gender, territorial, and economic inequalities. This includes supporting solidarity economies, food sovereignty, agroecology, and community led housing. In summary, the vision is clear: a just, inclusive, and climate resilient future built through participation, rights, and solidarity. It's about more than technology or markets, it's about people and communities. Let's keep these principles at the forefront as we continue our exploration into inclusive urban planning. Now, let's delve into some visionary and theoretical approaches that guide inclusive urban planning today. These frameworks are essential for creating cities that work for everyone. First, we have social justice planning. This approach, rooted in philosophies of John Rawls and expanded by Susan Feinstein, is all about fairness. It asks critical questions: who benefits from our urban planning decisions? And prioritizes the least advantaged in our communities. Next is equity planning, developed in response to more technocratic method. This approach emphasizes redistributive policies and inclusive service provision. It seeks to ensure that everyone has access to the resources they need. Participatory and collaborative planning is another crucial framework, advocated by thinkers like Patsy Healy. It focuses on stakeholders' engagement and co production of urban spaces. This means this means bringing marginalized voices into conversation because their input is invaluable. The capability approach proposed by Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum shifts the focus to expanding real freedoms and capabilities. It's about empowering individuals by creating environments that support their aspiration. Lastly, we have feminist and inclusive planning theories. These frameworks critique gender neutral planning, spotlighting issues like care work, safety, and everyday mobility. They remind us that planning must consider the diverse ways different groups use the urban spaces. Each of these frameworks brings us closer to cities that are not just built but lived by their communities. before we go further, let's check out the components of urban cities, which is illustrated in this diagram, closely aligned with the visionary and theoretical approaches to inclusive urban planning, which conceptualize cities as integrated socio-ecological system rather than a purely physical or economic entities. The emphasis on integration with the environment reflects sustainability theory and socio-ecological system thinking, where urban development is required to operate within ecological limits while maintaining human well being. This aligns with the environmental planning paradigm and climate responsive urbanism that advocate harmony between built form and natural system. The focus on smart infrastructure, buildings and land use, and smart transportation resonates with systems theory and integrated urban planning, where infrastructure, land use, and mobility are viewed as interdependent subsystems, shaping accessibility, efficiency, and equity. These components echo principles of compact city theory, transit oriented development, and smart growth, all of which seek to reduce spatial inequality, enhance service delivery, and promote inclusive access to urban opportunities. Open spaces and landscapes correspond with theories of urban livability, public realm theory, and biophilic urbanism, emphasizing the role of green and public spaces in promoting social interaction, mental health, and environmental justice. From an inclusive planning perspective, such spaces function as democratic commons, reinforcing the right to the city by ensuring equitable access to shared urban resources. The inclusion of social cohesion and cultural activities directly reflects communicative planning theory and participatory planning approaches, which stress social capital, cultural expression, and citizen engagement as foundation of inclusive cities. This perspective recognizes that inclusion is not only material but also relational, shaped by identity, participation, and collective belonging. Economic strength aligns with inclusive growth and urban political economy frameworks, which argue that economic development must be socially embedded, locally supportive, and distributive in nature to prevent exclusion and marginalization. Rather than growth for its own sake, economic vitality is positioned as an enabler of social inclusion and urban resilience. Finally, resilience, flexibility, and disaster response reflect resilience theory and adaptive planning, which prioritize preparedness, learning, and adaptability in the face of climate change, pandemics, and socioeconomic shocks. Inclusive planning frameworks emphasize that resilience must be socially grounded, protecting vulnerable population and ensuring equitable recovery rather than reproducing existing inequalities. Taken together, the diagram operationalizes visionary theories of inclusive urban planning by integrating environmental sustainability, social justice, economic inclusion, participatory governance, and resilience into a coherent urban system framework. It reinforces the idea that inclusive cities are not achieved through isolated interventions but through holistic, right based, and people centric planning paradigms. So, if we run through the timeline from the very beginning where all these things have started, we must go back to the early phase of the previous century, that is from 1900s to 1950s. We call it as a early welfare and rational planning. During this time, cities were designed primarily for efficiency, sanitation, and economic growth. It was a top down approach where decisions were made by experts, often overlooking the needs of everyday people. The key point here is the treatment of vulnerable groups. They were seen as beneficiaries, not active participants in the planning process. This approach focused more on meeting minimum standards rather than ensuring people's rights were respected. Two influential figures in this era were Ebenezer Howard and Lee Corbusier. Howard's Garden City concept aimed for social reform but did so indirectly, and Lee Corbusier, on the other hand, emphasized functional efficiency, which unfortunately led to socially exclusionary outcome. We may have difference of opinion, but as we reflect on this, think about how these early ideas set the stage for the later development in urban planning, where the focus shifted towards more inclusive and participatory process. Next, if we talk about the decade 1960s and 70s, this era marked a significant shift driven by civil rights movements and highlighted issues like urban poverty, segregation. Urban renewal often led to displacement, which made it clear that traditional planning wasn't meeting everyone's need. Uh, One of the key figures here is Paul Davidoff, who introduced the concept of advocacy planning. He argued that planners should actively represent marginalized communities. This was a radical idea at that point of time, emphasizing the need for diversity in representation and decision making. Another major contributor, Sherry Arnstein, introduced the ladder of citizen participation in 1969. Her work acknowledged the power imbalances in planning and advocated for genuine citizen involvement. The inclusion perspective during this period was transformative. It recognized these power imbalances and sought to rectify them through representation and redistribution. Remember these keywords: advocacy planning, equity planning, citizen participation, social justice. They all encapsulate the essence of this era and its ongoing influence on planning. Next, we'll explore the right based radical urban theory, which further built on these ideas. Uh, Now, moving on to more advancing the I mean, the end of the century, the late 60s to 80s. The fundamental concept in this era was seeing cities as spaces of collective rights rather than more economic, rather than a more of different economic zones. Henry Lefebvre influential idea of right to the city challenged traditional views by emphasizing the urban spaces are not just physical locations, they are social products shaped and and for the people who inhabit them. This perspective introduced the notion that everyone should have the right to access, use, and shape the city. Such ideas criticized capitalist urbanization, advocating for urban citizenship and spatial justice. This shift marked a significant move towards understanding cities as spaces where rights are lived and contested. This theory laid the groundwork for many contemporary discussion on urban rights and social justice. By recognizing urban spaces as collective assets, uh, we can at least acknowledge their potential to serve as platforms for equality and inclusion. The next, we can talk about the era or the decades uh, where communicative and collaborative planning are taking, were there to take place the of the previous era. So the communicative and collaborative planning from 1980s to the 90s, this period marked a significant shift towards planning as a dialogue. One of the key contribution during this time was made by Patsy Healy and collaborative and she had established with her book uh, collaborative planning. She emphasized the importance of bringing different stakeholders together, focusing on participation and dialogue. Similarly, John Forrester's work on communicative planning highlighted the need for conversations that foster understanding and consensus building. The inclusion perspective during this era was about recognizing and valuing the voices of multiple stakeholders alongside acknowledging local knowledge. This approach aimed to create a more inclusive planning process through open dialogue and engagement. However, it's crucial to acknowledge that these approaches had their limitations. The power asymmetries that can exist between stakeholders were sometimes underestimated, which could affect the overall effectiveness of the planning process. As we move forward, we'll see how these ideas evolved into focusing on social justice and the outcomes of planning rather than just the process. As we explore the evolution of inclusive urban planning, or the how the base or the platform has been staged for the inclusive just city planning, urban planning, we arrive at a significant era from 1990s to 2000, end of the century, social justice and the just city. The period marks a shift from merely focusing on the participatory process to achieve equitable outcomes in urban development. Two influential thinkers in the domain are Susan Feinstein and Edward Souza. Feinstein introduced the concept of just city, advocating for urban environments that prioritize diversity, democracy, and equity. Meanwhile, Souza uh, brought attention to spatial justice, a key element ensuring fair distribution of resources and opportunities across urban spaces. What makes this era distinctive is its focus on not just talking about inclusivity, but ensuring tangible benefits for all citizens. It's about moving beyond dialogue to see real inclusive outcomes, making cities places where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. As you think about these concepts, consider how they might apply to your own community or field of work. How can we ensure our efforts lead to just and equitable results? Uh, Next is capability, gender, and intersectional approaches of 90s to early of this century 2010s. The key figures are Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum, uh, who introduced the cap- capability approach, and Dolores Hayden, who pioneered feminist planning. Kimberly Crenshaw's work on intersectional intersectionality is also crucial. Together, these approaches emphasize the importance of expanding uh, real freedoms for everyone, recognizing that people face overlapping vulnerabilities based on gender, age, disability, and class. It's not about theoretical contributions. These approaches encourage planners to consider the lived the live experience of individuals in their everyday lives. Uh, it, all those aim to recognize and address the compounded challenges people face, ensuring dignity and respect are were at the core of the planning. To summarize, these approach isn't just about addressing disparities. It's about creating a framework where everyone can thrive, highlighting importance of inclusivity in all facets of planning. Now, uh, moving on with um, the work of the previous era or the previous contributors to the inclusivity, we explored the paradigm of universal design and accessibility, coined by famous architect, product designer, advocate, and educator Ronald Mess. The idea here is simple yet transformative. We move away from designing for special needs towards creating environments that are inclusive by default. This means everyone, regardless of ability, can navigate or enjoy the spaces we build. Ronald Mess is a visionary in this field, alongside the disability rights movement, has been instrumental in advocating for this shift. Universal design isn't just about removing barriers. It's about ensuring our built environment becomes enabler, fostering independence and dignity. This shift towards inclusive infrastructure sets the stage for our next discussion on how inclusion intersects with resilience and rights based urbanism. In this section, we will explore the concept of inclusiveness, resilience, right based urbanism. This approach has gathered momentum from the 2010s to the present. Key drivers were UN Sustainable Development Goals, particularly um, SDG, uh, the goal number 11, which emphasizes creating cities that are inclusive, safe, and resilient. Additionally, with the support of other verticals of UN, the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, or UNCRPD, and the challenges posed by climate change and disaster risks are pivotal in shaping our urban landscape. From an inclusion perspective, it's essential to recognize how inclusion intertwines with resilience, sustainability, and governance. This means considering the needs of the persons with disability, the elderly, women, children, uh, gender neutral individuals, non binary individuals, and migrants in our urban planning process. As we continue, let's think about how these principles can transform our cities into spaces that not only adapt to change but also respect and integrate the rights of all individuals. Uh, so, based on discussion till now, uh, we can say that our discussion so far and the direction, how the direction of inclusivities are moving, that the digital inclusion and smart cities as technology become integral to daily life, ensuring everybody can access and benefit from it. This means creating a digital infrastructure that can be accessible to all regardless of their background or abilities. Next, in inclusiveness comes in terms of climate adaptation, with climate change posing significant threats on our urban planning or on our urban scenario must consider it is considered as most vulnerable situation for the population who are facing it day to day, ensuring that they are protected and the resources are resilient enough to uh, support them. This involves innovative strategies with sustainability and inclusivity. And finally, emergency responsive urban design, like pandemic or any other natural or man-made threats, uh, where the health crisis or the existential crisis of human being are highlighted for the need for cities to be adaptable to all those threats. And this way, with this new directions, uh, with digital inclusion, climate justice, adaptive planning, uh, we as a planner, as a professional, we take away this all those learning right from the very beginning, or right from the initial stages of inclusive planning till now, and further for designing our urban environment uh, as a place where all can live with their uh, cho- uh, uh, with their independence and dignity. After discussing all the theories uh, which uh, which the the stalwarts had thought about, and they had uh, advocated for the betterment of the larger section of the society. Let's discuss the legal and policy framework. The RPWD Act, which mandates accessibility, non discrimination, and universal design in public infrastructure, this aligns with the ethos of inclusivity and equity emphasized by the National Urban Policy Framework. Additionally, 74th Constitutional Amendment Act plays crucial role by strengthening urban local government and enhancing citizen participation. Next, consider the government schemes that support inclusion. Accessible India campaign or Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan focuses on creating barrier free public buildings and transport system. Schemes like Amrut and PMAY Urban aim to ensure universal access to essential urban services and affordable housing for economically weaker sections. The Smart Cities mission incorporates inclusion components, while uh, DAY supports livelihood for the urban poor. Finally, at the city level, initiatives such as uh, complete policies, gender responsive budgeting, and universal accessibility audits are being implemented. There are also efforts to create child friendly and age friendly city initiatives at different level at different cities. These measures demonstrates a comprehensive approach to inclusive urban planning across different governance layers. Universal design, or UD, is all about creating environments that are inherently inclusive, usable by everybody to the fullest extent without needing special adaptation. Here I must cite an example which I cite quite often in my class. That once I was in a metro in the city of Singapore, and being an Indian, I saw a person with a wheelchair uh, rode that uh, metro, and as, as a matter of um, support, I asked the person and I offered my seat to him, and that person was uh, not my seat, my space to him, and the person was very offended, as that person thought that I have discriminated him for his condition, which was not my intention. But then I understood, in that city, moving with a wheelchair is not uh, is not to be seen as a uh, element for compassion or sympathy. They are citizen, as they have the equal rights, they have the equal uh, uh, they have the sense of that equality to use the infrastructure in the city. So that had given me a very big lesson back in my country, and I have seen more progress since then. Here also, people are using the infrastructure, the people on wheelchair, people with other sensory impairment, they are using public infrastructure more with more ease. But here is our learning as a professional that inclusivity comes within, not to be implemented, not to be, um, it is not cosmetic. You cannot put extra thing to make it inclusive. It's as the city grows, it's for all. It's for all. It should embrace all. So there are seven core principles uh, for universal design. Goes as equitability, equitable use, flexibility, simple and intuitive design, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, appropriate size and space for approach and use. The goal here is to create a barrier free environment that everyone can enjoy, truly human centered design. It's not just about compliance to some rules and regulations. It's not, as I am saying, it should come from your core. The city at its core should have it, the inclusivity, the space for all. It's not about only for the disabled, only for the children, only for the uh, advantaged, nor only for the disadvantaged section. It should embrace all. Next, global good practices in inclusive planning. Though I have rushed this part in this particular discussion, we'll come to this in my later stages of my lecture series on this inclusive planning. Probably I will cover this in lecture 9 or 10. Uh, we start with multi-stakeholder in engagement, where government, so civil society, private sector, academia, and communities collaborate, participatory budgeting and community planning, going on with inclusive planning, inclusive public spaces, accessible mobility and transport, social infrastructure and services, disaster risk reduction. So, uh, the point is, each and every country, each and every city has some or the other um, good thing about them where the initiative has been taken, uh, especially post 2010. Uh, a good amount of public money is invested to make a city for all, inclusive in nature. It goes back to good governance, participation of the citizens, inclusive, taking inclusive decision in terms of housing allocation, budgeting, mobility consideration, disaster resilience, livelihood choice, social cohesion, and other infrastructure and services which are equitable in nature. Mm, the last portion section of the discussion uh, comes for how how where sh- where is the starting point, and that starts with a vision, a long vision, uh, where we can see the visionary ideas will uh, accomplish this uh, task of inclusivity. So, visioning is important, and for that we have number of literature available, and many of the professional thinkers, journalists, they have talked about it, debated it, and we are talking about the people centric planning, equity, and justice in spatial distribution, universal accessibility, participatory governance, cultural, how to embrace cultural diversity and social integration for the for the non local people who are coming to the city or the urban area for livelihoods, resilience to climate, health, and disaster risk. So we need to have a shift in the planning approach. We need to have a shift in the thinking process. We must adopt integrated planning, moving away from infrastructure centric views to human centric perspectives. It is not just about reacting to the needs with welfare, it's about proactively creating an environment for inclusion. So, we have now reached at the end of today's discussion. Inclusive urban planning represents decisive shift from growth centric and technology led city development toward a people centered, right based, and system oriented urban vision. So, looking forward to answer more queries from you. You can write to my email uh, for uh, addressing the issues that I may have missed out, or you may have different opinion about it. Please write to me. Thanks.